Well, howdy there, everyone. Welcome back to another video. How are you? Welcome to Good Burger. Home to Good. Can I take your order? How are you guys doing today? I hope you're doing fantastic. And this was a video actually brought up by you guys. I can't remember what the video I did a while ago was, but you're like, hey, you should do a video about stuff that you've learned that you don't use. And I was like, oh yeah, you know, that'd be a good idea. And then Pete Thorne's live stream, he mentioned how he was trying to learn 8-finger tapping in college, and he's like, look, obviously I use it a lot now because he doesn't really do 8-finger tapping. I was like, oh yeah, I need to make that video. So here are a bunch of them. Now, understand, I'm sure this will upset some people about the things that I say that I've learned and I don't use. But, you know, I'd just be curious to know if there's anything that you've learned over the years, and you're just kind of like, you know what, I spent a lot of time learning that, but I never really use it. So here we go, number one. All right, so this one is bound to upset some people, but it is learning to read sheet music. Now, keep in mind, I'm not trying to deter anyone from learning any of this stuff. That's totally up to you if you can see the value in it. And I can certainly see the value in learning how to read sheet music. I just don't think it ever really applied to me necessarily. I learned how to read it early on. Obviously, when I was in school, like elementary school, we learned how to read sheet music in music class. And then later, when I started playing guitar, I learned how to read it a little bit. But to be honest, I never went back to, I never came into the situation where I needed to know how to read sheet music. So it's one of those things, you know, I always say if you don't use it, you lose it. So, I kind of like got away from it after all these years. And then like, I was just kind of thinking, I was like, you know, have I ever needed to know how to do it? I can certainly think it's, you know, useful if you're a session player or something like that, but it wasn't the style of music necessarily that inspired me, you know, being rock and stuff like that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with learning how to read sheet music. I just know that I put a lot of time into it, and now I'm just kind of like, oh, well, now I couldn't read it if I wanted to, so all that time was basically wasted. I could have put that into learning the pentatonic scale even quicker. Now, to kind of comment on my buddy Pete's concept of it, he was mentioning how he was learning 8-finger tapping. I remember I spent so much time learning how to do the Reb Beach style of tapping. If you're not familiar with it, basically what he does is he'll do like a phrase, I can't do it anymore. Again, case in point, I haven't practiced it. But basically he would walk up a scale, like a G major scale or something like that, tap, and then flick the next string with his ring finger, and then that would basically give him the ability to change strings without, you know, needing to pick up his fingers or something like that. Like that. So, I'm obviously not good at it anymore, but that's kind of what he was doing. I remember trying to learn, if you're familiar with Reb Beach at all, you probably know his song, Black Magic. That part, and it goes to this killer riff. Try to remember it all. Oh. I can barely remember it now, but I just remember it leads into this big tapping line. And I remember I learned it all, like I had it down and all that kind of stuff, and then it was his usseting runs, I spent forever, and then I was just kind of like, well, how do I use this stuff? So it was all these hours spent learning how to do it. And then later I figured, I'm like, you know, I really don't like tapping stuff. And, you know, maybe this video will inspire me to work on tapping. But even though Eddie's my favorite guitar player, I was like, do I like the sound of tapping? And I like realized, I'm like, I don't think I like the sound of tapping. I like pick notes and stuff like that. So it's just kind of one of those funny things. I like spent all this time learning it, and I was like, why did I learn this? Like, I don't, this isn't like my favorite kind of sound or anything like that. So it was just kind of funny. now to look back at it, because I certainly don't use it anymore. But you know what? I'm sure I got something out of it, but it's just kind of funny because I barely do any tapping stuff. Now, number 3 is a lot of the beginner songs. I'm not talking about learning some AC/DC or something like that. I've talked about a similar topic in other videos, and I know myself as a teacher, when I used to teach in-person lessons and all that stuff, I always made sure that whoever the student was, like, we figured out what they wanted to play, like whoever inspired them to pick up the guitar, and I tried to have them playing some kind of piece of music from that person day one, whether they'd come in and they're like, oh, I like Metallica. We would learn Nothing Else Matters. And they'd be so pumped up, or Smoke on the Water, or whatever it was. I would like find a real small little piece, and I'd be like, oh, okay, this is super simple. Here, this is how they do it. And always inspired. Now, when I started learning how to play, this is actually part of why I quit playing when I first started. It was all from books, and they wanted you to learn like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and Mary Had a Little Lamb and all this kind of stuff. And I understand why books show you that. It's more than likely because that is public domain, so they don't have to pay for any kind of publishing rights to use that kind of music. But it was all these old songs, and I'm like, I don't like this kind of music. I remember sitting there learning it, and I'm just like, this is all like so uninspiring. So I ended up stopping playing guitar when I was a kid. And when I came back to it and got lessons, I remember my teacher asked me, it's like, well, who do you like? I'm like, well, I love, Van Halen and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, all right. He's like, Eddie's stuff is pretty tough. What other bands do you like? And I was like, oh, and Three Doors Down was new at the time with their song Kryptonite. And he was like, that'd be a good challenge. Let's work on that. So he showed me that dreaded B minor chord. But it sounded like the song. I was so inspired. I was like, I'm going to get this chord down. I remember it took me forever to get B minor to G to that A sus2. But once I had it, I was hooked from that point on. And it was because it was something I wanted to learn. I spent all that time learning those other songs, which made me want to quit playing guitar. And it wasn't until someone was like, oh, no, let's learn what's inspiring you to want to play. Boom, right there, I knew. I was like, oh, okay, this is the stuff I want to spend time on. And one thing I figured we'd end on, again, I'm sure these are ticking people off left and right. I'm looking at you. Yeah, you're probably typing a mean comment right now, aren't you? It's cool, bro. So the last one I want to talk about is learning all these strict rules about music. And I think the longer you play, the more you kind of like realize that I guess one of the biggest rule is there kind of are no rules. I mean, there's rules when it comes to the theory side of how stuff works, but I think the biggest rule is what Eddie Van Halen said: if it sounds good, it is good. So that's a huge kind of rule to play by. But I remember learning, and I was a really big advocate of this for years, and it was, making sure a finger per fret essentially was what I did, Always, no matter what, I was doing a finger per fret. And what I kind of figured out later was that, well, you don't have to do that kind of stuff. Like, you don't have to just use that. It's not a hard, strict rule. You can figure out different ways. And actually, I purposely went to using these 3 fingers more sometimes than this. And it was because I liked to reach. So I shouldn't say that I don't use that anymore, but it was just kind of like, when I was learning, I thought that was like the end all. Like, you had to follow these rules. And that was it. And then as I kind of got older, I realized, oh, you know, I don't have to use just those rules. You know, I can do this other stuff, you know, because like I said, a lot of times I like to play with these fingers, not because I can't use my pinky, it's because I like to reach up. So if I'm doing like a pentatonic lick, I'll go like that so I can get that major third. Stuff like that. So, like I said, I guess that one kind of doesn't count because I still used, obviously, the knowledge of being able to play a finger per fret, but I also kind of like had to unlearn that was like the rule, like you have to do it this way. And I quickly found out, I was like, oh, you know what? You can kind of like, you know, make up your own rules almost. So, I don't know if that one even counts, but I'll throw it in there anyways. It was something I definitely learned over time. So, let me know some stuff maybe that you learned how to do that you really don't use, and, you know, we'll just kind of go from there. So, other than that, homies, I'm going to bounce on out of here. Peace out, keep on rocking, and I will see you later. Bye, guys.